All right, welcome back, everyone, on a Shot of E&J podcast. This is your co-host, Eric Igwe, my boy.
Jeremy Anadaminta.
All right, and now we're back to talk about the path towards home ownership. Let's talk about, the path towards home ownership, guidance that we can provide for people who are trying to get a home, especially in this climate, and talk about other roadblocks and impediments along the way. But before we do that, let's talk about the current situation, current climate of housing in the housing market. So Jeremy, tell us about the current state of home ownership.
So I think home ownership right now is in a state of flux, right? It is definitely a seller's market. You're seeing a lot of people put their homes on the market and get, double, triple what they would have gotten a couple years ago, right? And obviously, home values appreciate over time, but we're talking about a considerable amount more growth than would be expected had things just continued as they normally would with certain appreciation models and so on and so forth. A lot of this is being fueled by, the inflation that we talked about in the top news of, the day. Inflation is an issue because, especially for individuals, for instance, if you're living in California, you're living in the West Coast, inflation is really going to hit you, right? So you might start looking for jobs and you might find a job in Texas, right? Well, you move to Texas and you're looking at these home prices and you're like, man, we could really afford this. You know what I'm saying? Most people, when they make moves for employment reasons to a different state, aren't really taking a huge pay cut, right? Or in a lot of instances, depending on your industry, if you're working in tech or something like that, you may not be taking a huge pay cut. And yet your buying power now is significantly more. And so what does that mean? You're willing to pay a lot more for the house that previously would not have cost that much, right? Because you would have had people locally would have been vying to get that house. And so sellers know because of this, they can get more. They can get more money. They can sell for higher prices because people coming from out of state that are used to these higher prices are going to be willing to pay. So that's putting a lot of upward pressure on housing prices. And so what that does to your local population is that it sort of prices them out of, homes that typically they would also be able to afford. And so we're seeing that happen, I think, at a rather alarming rate. And, there are a lot of other issues as well that are contributing to that. And I know there's some that you want to talk about. So.
Well, no, I think part of it, like you mentioned people coming in, the influx of people coming in and have a larger, able to spend a little bit more, right? Because the environment they come from, i.e. California, right? I think also with inflation, the supply chain constraints really has played an impact. For example, when I was getting my home, October of 2020, my wife and I, or fiance, well, it was close to being fiance, but at that time we went ahead and gave our earnest money building a new home. And it was on a Sunday. And I remember the builder told us, I'm glad you did that because the next day your value is going to increase by $3,000. And that's because the price of lumber. So with the supply chain constraints, there's the supply is low on lumber, and so the prices have been rising up. The heartbreak of the foundation of your home is like, the lumber, right? Like lumber is a huge part, obviously, of building a home, and so when you have the supply constraints and it takes a while to get lumber and there's not a lot of supply, those prices rise up. And that definitely contributed to the the increase in home values over the past year or 2 years. It took a while to get bricks when I was having a home. When I was in a home buying process, it took a while. There was delay in getting bricks. So all those adds up and does increase the value of the home substantially. We talked about that. Supply chain constraints, and so all these kind of adds up. It makes it harder for people try to pursue that American dream.
Right. So I think what's important, as we get further into this conversation about home ownership and sort of how to inform people and help people, is for them to understand the process of buying a home. So you talked about a little bit about, your experience in one aspect of it. Can we kind of give a general, summary to people of what is the home buying process? And what was it like for you?
Yeah, so the home buying process I mentioned earlier. So, married now, but back then, my wife and I, she was not my wife, but girlfriend, on the way to become fiance. And so around October of 20, and I'm losing myself. October
2019.
No, 2020. It's 2020. Yeah.
Okay.
So October 2020, we went around looking for homes in Fort Worth, and so we found some homes. We decided to build, right, rather than just finding homes in the market. We decided to actually build, and so we found an opportunity to build. We gave our earnest money. So for those who don't know, if you're building a new home, right, new home and going through a builder, you got to make sure you got to get your pre-approvals for finance. You got to find a lender who's going to give you a pre-approval amount for that home value.
Yeah.
You also got to be able to pay the earnest money, and it's sometimes I think it's based on a certain percentage, or some cases it can be $3,500, $5,000. But in some cases you may not have to pay earnest money or a very low one, depends on the builder. But usually you have to, in order for them to build a new home, and I'm talking from building a new home perspective, not finding homes on the market. You have to have pre-approval from a lender at that amount. You also have to pay your earnest money, and of course, fill out application. And so we did all that and pay our earnest money, and then the home building process started. And so from there, it's been intriguing process to watch. So it started October, November, and the home finally got built in April 2021, end of April 2021. But throughout the whole process, you're watching people putting the plumbing in, you watch people put electrical in. And during that process, you have to work with the lender and really try to find way, because they have to underwrite your loan. And so in our situation, we went through the lender tied to the builder. And so what people don't know is that part of the game is, for these new builds, there are some companies, like my builder, I want to make sure I had it right, the builder I went through, they own a certain percentage of that lending company. And so they're able to offer just certain offerings like, we'll waive off $4,000 off your closing costs, or $3,500 off your closing costs. We'll make some other deals because they have that partnership or own a percentage of that lending company.
And they want the business.
And so it's an intriguing thing. And in some cases, if you do that, and my home is custom home, so they'll give you some extra money off designs.
Yeah. So
when you go into a design center, they'll give you some extra money discounts off. And so that's the intriguing process when it comes to home buying. It's like, do I go with this lender that gives you all these benefits, or do I try to find another lender who can give me better interest rate, better deal as far as closing costs? And so it's kind of balancing at that. And I can tell you, in my experience, there's a lot of pressure to go with the existing lender, because they just throw that package of route in front of you and says, bam, you go with us and my lender, essentially. We're gonna take $3,500 or $4,000 off your closing costs. We're going to give you extra discounts on your home design process, a little more than you would if you went through another lender. It just adds a little pressure where a lot of people end up, some cases rather get their own lender, end up falling and using that lender because of the pressures and the fact that they literally set everything up for you to use their lender.
Right.
And in that situation, as we go through the HUD process, by the time I got to fill out the application or fill out the final paperwork, it already stated that my loan's going to get passed to someone else.
Yeah.
So it's like an interesting game where, like, you have the builder who owns a percentage of the lending company. They're got your loan, essentially the loan, and they pass it on immediately. And so it's a good business. It's an interesting, unique business model on how they're able to pull off and they make their money off people using that lender and using that lender, which is part of that partnership between the builder and lender. But also throughout the process, make sure you have your documentation right. It helps a lot if you have money saved. Especially down payment. It is hard to put 20% down payment. Very hard. I didn't, so it was hard to put 20% down payment. I mean, we've had savings to put money down, but 20% is hard. So especially the value of the homes today. And so you got to be prepared to look at, what loans do I get as a result of that? Huge part, too, that helped me in the home buying process is your credit score. Yeah. Lenders are willing to do a lot more leeway if you got a good credit score, because your credit score can greatly impact your interest rate.
Yeah. What's a good credit score for people out there? What do you think?
I don't want to quote. I mean, some people say over 620. right? Probably for a lot of cases to get you in the door.
Yeah.
I think if you get around at least 700 something.
I was going to say, I think 620 is the minimum.
I think minimum. In my opinion, if you get, I think at least 720, 730 to really
get a good interest rate.
And I took advantage of an interest rate where it was a little bit lower back in 2020, 2021. So I actually closed at 3%.
Yeah.
When in a lot of cases people close at 4, 5%, 4 or 5%. But part of it's also having a good credit score, I'll be honest. My wife and I, that played a huge factor in that. So
Absolutely.
Part of that process is making sure you have a good credit score because that can influence your interest rate. Making sure you have a good the ratio for debt to income ratio, right? If the ratio is too high as far as debt to income, that can greatly influence the package and the loan in your loan.
Right, and basically all that means is you have a lot of debt. You don't make enough money to service the debt. You know what I'm saying? The higher that ratio is, the worse that they are saying. You may not be able to repay us on this loan. There's a higher chance that you may default on this loan. And
that's part of them checking the credit score is, and when you're owning a home, is checking credit score. Look at your financial history. Do you consistently make payments?
Right.
Or are you the type to miss payments?
Right.
Because if you're missing payments, then we can't trust you with this loan. If you have a huge pattern of that. And so that's part of that process. And it's not fun constantly putting documents together, send it to them. With my pay stubs, constantly putting documents again, sending them to them. But throughout the whole process, it's been something else, especially inspecting a home. One of the tips I'll give is pay for pre-drywall inspection. Yes, it's going to cost some money, a couple $100, but we're able to find a lot of stuff before they put drywall in. And that can save you thousands of dollars by having someone inspect it and make sure things are fixed. Because the reality is, no matter how good a builder is, a lot of them have deadlines, and they tend to sometimes rush. Sometimes they can tend to overlook things.
So for the people, just so it's clear, when do you have this? You said what inspection? What did you call it?
A pre-drywall inspection. So in my case, when they're building a home, there is a pre-drywall inspection. In my builder, they allow me an opportunity to take a look at it, make sure everything's fine before they put drywall.
With your own inspector or with the builder?
Oh, I got my own inspector. Okay. I don't be using. No, I got my own inspector, and I paid the money, and they found some things, and I got them to fix it. So at that time, I got an inspector to come in and check, and make sure. And they found some things, and we had the builder fix it before they put drywall.
Right.
Because once you put drywall, it's hard.
Yeah.
After that,
it gets a lot harder.
It gets a lot harder. But those are some of the tips, and those are some of my process. Eventually, able to close in April, and able to make sure you have some of the money down to put money down, and for there the rest is history.
What is closing? If just for people out there, what does it mean when you close on a home? We hear that thrown out a lot.
Well, to close, it essentially means you have like wrapped up all the necessary financial statements and paperwork to essentially have the deed or the home go to you. And so there is a lot, and it's so complicated when you look at the documents, like all these fees add up. What is this fee? What is this fee? Fee to brokerage, fee to this, fee to this. And then so you have closing costs, which can be assessed through the lender, right? But it's all essentially paying all the necessary fees in order for the transition to happen, for you to fully have the home to you. And there's just a lot of fees that assess. You look at all those financial numbers, that's just a lot of money. A lot of people putting their fees in, making money off of this home buying process.
Yeah.
But what's your thoughts overall? Any perspective on your end?
Yeah. So I guess Texas is a deed state. And there's a legal term for it. But basically, once you close on a home and you sign all the paperwork, you have title to the home. So you are viewed as a homeowner, although the home is collateral, right? So if you fail to make payments, there's a certain process before a bank or whatever financial institution that you go through would actually be able to foreclose on your house. But they can't do that. There are other states where there's it's an alternative theory where they would say that the financing or the financial institution actually holds the rights to the property, the title. And so it transfers upon you making the final payment. But if I'm not mistaken, Texas is a title state. And so that some of those things are part of the process. I think closing can be a scary thing because, you have to think about things like title insurance too, right? Not so much in your case because you have a new build, but if you're buying a home that was pre-existing, they've got to do a search to make sure that there's no, liens against the property. It could be tax liens where people haven't paid taxes on it and they're owed. And so that could cloud your title. And in other words, it could present issues for you getting, full ownership rights. You could have water liens on the property, all kinds of issues. So there's that process. And so normally, a title company will be, involved and do the research and certify. And they charge a fee for that too. That's part of the whole closing cost deal, right?
They title charges fees too. And part of it's finding a good real estate agent.
Yes.
You got to find an agent who's going to fight for you and willing to look the builders in their face and really say, hey, what offerings can you provide? Right. Now for new builds, it's a little bit hard, but for other places, this is when the real estate make their money, right? Yeah. Like the agent's got to have the strength to have those conversations with sellers.
So that's a good question. Did you have your own real estate agent?
I did.
Or did you? Okay.
I did.
So I can just speak about this a little bit because my parents are buying a home and I've been very involved in the process with them. And so some individuals, a couple of things like what you talked about, like getting your pre-approval from your own financial institution. A lot of people will come, and I think you said it, they'll come and they'll have their own pre-approval. They've already gone to the bank. They've got their approval up to a certain amount for a certain price home with a certain interest rate. But like you said, the builder will try to lure you in by saying, well, hey, we're going to give you all these incentives or whatnot. So, people have to weigh that, right? And in terms of how do you come out better? If you feel like you're not, especially you're going on with a custom build and you feel like, hey, we're not going to really add a whole lot of bells and whistles, it may make more sense to go with your lender, right? But if not, if we're going to really pile on all the extras and stuff like that, then you might, want to consider that. So that's something. And then I think it's important in the home buying process to, we talked about real estate agents, right? That's what we were talking about. So your real estate agent can also be provided by the builder, which is what some people go in and they look at different neighborhoods and they're like, oh, I want to buy this home. They go to the builder and the builder has their own real estate agent. So that's something too that you see. And I tend to agree with you that it's better if you have your own because your real estate agent should be your advocate. They're not always, if you don't get a real estate agent that's really invested in you, but they really are your advocate. So the whole home buying process, I think we did a good job of kind of summarizing it. And again, it looks a little different if you're buying a custom home, such as yourself.
Yeah. Or buying a new build versus buying one
when it's already on the market, right? So
what do you now going to this, knowing we're talking about the process, what are some of the impediments in your opinion that's keeping people from owning the home?
So I think the biggest thing is just personal finances. I think and we kind of talked about that a lot already, but I'll say it again, typically, what they say, you should put 20% down, right? Now, that's really hard. We talked about the economy right now. That can be really hard for people to be able to save up enough money to get the home that they want and to be able to put 20% down. So that's something that, financial literacy, making sure that you are aware you're budgeting so that you can save enough money so that, you can afford this home. You can go to the bank and say, you know what, I can legitimately put down a larger down payment. And so my mortgage payment won't be as much, because that's the other thing. The more you put down, the less that you have to pay on the back end. And so it behooves you to, put down as much as you can. The other thing, obviously, is credit score, right? A lot of individuals are not as responsible with money. And so their credit score suffers, whether they have a lot of credit cards open, whether they have loans for various things. And so that is something that your financial institution, your bank, credit union, they're going to consider, and it's going to increase your interest rate, right? This is the amount of money you're being charged for the privilege of borrowing the money from the bank. So I think it's really important, financial literacy. I think the other thing for home ownership is to generally understand the different programs that are available, that your city may offer, that your county may offer, that your state offers, in order to become a homeowner, right? Especially there are a lot of programs for first-time homeowners, which effectively subsidize the home buying process for you.
Yeah.
Which can for a lot of people that allows them to be able to afford the home because now you're not having to pay as much, right? So I think those things. It's important for people to be aware that there are programs out there to be able to reach out to your local government and to be able to see, whether you go to City Hall or whatever you do, to see, okay, what are programs for first time, especially if this is your first time trying to buy a home, what are the programs for it? Because if you don't have the information, that's going to be an impediment. And then again, like I said, personal finances. If your personal finances are not in order, it is definitely an impediment, and it makes owning a home much more challenging. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I agree. I think getting access to information, like you're saying, and I know after break we're going to talk more about those programs and other tips, but I think access to information sometimes, as far as the financial literacy or having those conversations with the bank or going other financial literacy programs offered to the city or county can really help guide people through the process, because the home buying process can be very intimidating, right? Personal finances are key. Building up your credit score. If your credit score is not that great, it's time to build it up before you think about getting a home. Now, if you want to go and pursue it, you can. But if you really want to get some of those better deals, if you want to get more favorable interest rates, right? And your credit score is not on point, that's another. I see that's another thing that prevents people from owning a home. And then also this market. The way things are going. When I got it, the interest rate low. Now the interest rates are all the way back up again, and the demand is still high, and so it makes it harder right now. I think that's a big. This is just by far the biggest impediment is that inflation is rising up. Wages are not rising as high. Still demand is still high. Mortgage rates interest are not high. It's not like it was in late 2020 or early 2021 actually. And so that makes it harder. Like you're talking about DFW area, you're talking about homes now $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, right? I'm from Houston, 2003, family closed a home around $150 for a 2-story home. Now today, that home. If they split it up, it's probably $350,000, $400,000 easily.
300 plus.
And so, but the wages hasn't risen as high. So those sort of impediments. So now it's like a wait and see game. Like, is the recession coming? That's going to help. And it's unfortunate to say that, but like, is it going to be a housing bubble again? Who's going to get impacted? Is it got to turn to a buyer's? What's it going to take to turn to a buyer's market? But unless you build up have your credit score and some of your finances on point, it gets harder. And so part of that is trying to, and we'll talk about it, is really getting that information from the financial institutions and other programs too. But we'll talk more of that in a break. So when we come back, we'll talk about and provide some key tips and ideas from our perspective that'll help towards path of home ownership, and talk about how elected officials can play a part in easing some of the issues and concerns in regards to home ownership. So stay tuned. Come back on the Shot of E&J podcast.
Yes, sir.